The gala was supposed to be perfect. Chandeliers sparkled like 1,000 frozen stars above the ornate ballroom, their light catching the shimmer of couture gowns and polished tuxedos. Champagne flowed freely in crystal flutes, glasses clinking in delicate harmony as the elite of Hollywood and the world's most powerful figures mingled effortlessly, exchanging polite smiles and subtle nods. But amidst the glittering elegance, a storm was quietly brewing. A storm that no one could have predicted. What if I told you that night, one of the most influential women in the world, Oprah Winfrey herself, picked up her phone and made a call that would shock everyone in attendance? That she would summon security not for a minor disturbance, but to confront one of the most talked-about figures of the decade? Yes, Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, was at the center of a scandal that would dominate headlines and social feeds for days. And the question on everyone's mind was the same. Who invited her? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine walking into the Grand American Ballet Theatre Fall Gala, expecting a night of refined art, music, and cultured conversation, only to find that the person who controls the room, who dictates who gets access and who doesn't, is watching your every move. Oprah, known for her poise, her influence, and her legendary authority, had her eyes on Meghan from the moment she arrived. And as Meghan made her entrance, cameras flashing, whispers rippling through the crowd like a sudden gust of wind, a chain reaction began, a reaction that would shake the carefully constructed social hierarchies of Hollywood and the royal world alike. The air was electric. Celebrities maneuvered with practiced ease, their conversations light but sharp, their laughter measured. Everyone was acutely aware of the delicate balance of power in the room. A wrong glance, a misstep, or a whispered insult could ripple outward with consequences far beyond a single evening. And yet, Meghan entered with all the confidence of someone used to commanding attention. Was it bravery? Was it arrogance? Or was it a calculated move? The cameras caught her every gesture, from the slight tilt of her head to the subtle smirk that crossed her lips. Some attendees leaned in to see what would happen next. Some quietly tensed, recognizing the potential for chaos. You have to understand the gravity of this moment. This was not a casual dinner party or a small charity event. This was the American Ballet Theatre Gala, a pinnacle of cultural prestige, attended by actors, directors, philanthropists, and royalty. The kind of event where seating charts are more than just names on paper. They are statements of influence, power, and belonging. And Meghan, for reasons known only to a few insiders, had found her way onto that list, or so she believed. But backstage, the tension was palpable. Staff whispered, comparing notes, exchanging glances that conveyed far more than words could capture. Did she really get an invite? One coordinator murmured. I thought the guest list was finalized weeks ago, replied another, the disbelief evident in her voice. Security personnel quietly strategized, ready to intervene at a moment's notice. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, a silent prelude to what would become the most dramatic confrontation of the evening. And then there was Oprah. Even before the gala officially began, she was surveying the room, her gaze sweeping over the sparkling gowns and tailored suits, noting every interaction, every potential disruption. When Oprah steps into a room, she doesn't just enter, she owns it. Her presence is magnetic, commanding, and unyielding. And that night, she sensed something amiss. A ripple in the otherwise flawless surface of the event. Someone who didn't belong. Or at least, someone whose presence could ignite a storm. From the very first whispers, the crowd sensed it. Photographers leaned in, capturing fleeting moments of hesitation and intrigue. Gossip was exchanged in hushed tones, the kind that makes its way to social media before the event had even ended. People tweeted under the hashtag #ABTGala 2025, speculating on arrivals, on the tension that seemed to pulse beneath the chandeliers. And at the center of this storm, Meghan moved gracefully, but with an aura that suggested she was aware of the eyes on her, and the opinions forming in real time. What exactly happened that night? Was it a misunderstanding? A clash of personalities? Or was it the culmination of years of scrutiny, criticism, and intrigue surrounding Meghan Markle, now colliding head-on with one of the most formidable forces in media history? And as the tension mounted, the question on everyone's lips became impossible to ignore. who had really invited her. This story isn't just about a single gala. It's about the collision of worlds, the royal, the celebrity, and the cultural titans of America. It's about influence, power, and the unspoken rules that govern who belongs and who doesn't. It's about the moment when a meticulously curated evening erupted into chaos, when whispers turned into actions, and when the impossible became reality. By the end of this video, you're going to see the full sequence of events, from Meghan's daring arrival to the point when security, acting under Oprah's direction, made the decision that would shock everyone in attendance. You'll hear insider accounts, discover the backstage dramas, and see how a single phone call can alter the course of an evening, and perhaps even a reputation. But here's the thing. Even as security moved, even as cameras captured the confrontation, even as social media exploded, there were layers to this story that no one outside that ballroom could fully understand. Motivations, alliances, subtle power plays. All of it will come to light as we unravel exactly what happened that night. And trust me, some of it will leave you speechless. So hold on. Keep your eyes and ears open, because what comes next is more than just a gala gone wrong. It's a masterclass in influence, a lesson in public perception, and a spectacle of human behavior that you will not forget. And as you watch, ask yourself, if you were in that room, how would you react? Would you have dared to enter? Would you have noticed the signals before it was too late? Or would you, like many that night, have been caught entirely by surprise? Because by the time the first confrontation ended, the evening that promised elegance and grace had transformed into a battleground of whispers, glances, and decisive actions. And the ripple effects wouldn't stop at the doors of the gala. They would continue to reverberate through Hollywood, royal circles, and the internet for weeks to come. And just when it seemed that the story had reached its peak, there was one final, unexpected twist, one revelation that would force everyone, even Oprah herself, to reconsider everything they thought they knew about that night. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Some doors are never meant to open. Some invitations, no matter how polished, carefully worded, or quietly whispered into the right ear, simply don't exist. Yet, on the night of the 2025 American Ballet Theatre Fall Gala, Meghan Markle stepped into a room where her presence should have been impossible, or at least, highly questionable. It all began weeks before the gala. Invitations for the ABT Fall Gala are notoriously selective. Not just anyone can waltz into the gilded halls of Lincoln Center, no matter how many headlines they grace or how many red carpets they've dominated. Every guest is meticulously vetted, every RSVP scrutinized, and every seating arrangement calculated to maximize social synergy or prevent disaster. Celebrity planners joke that one wrong invite can ripple through Hollywood like a rogue pebble in a pond, sending unexpected chaos spiraling across the A-list. And yet, here we are. Meghan Markle, dressed in a gown that commanded attention yet radiated controlled elegance, had somehow arrived. Some insiders claimed it was a last-minute attempt by her team, a strategy of audacity mixed with persuasion. Others whispered about creative networking backstage, calls made to influential insiders, subtle nudges, even leveraging ties to people who had been part of past galas. But the truth? The truth is murky. Even among gala coordinators, opinions vary, and everyone seems to tell a slightly different version of the story. So let's start at the beginning, the invite list itself. For a gala like this, it's not merely a guest list. It's a map of power, prestige, and influence. Kings of finance, Oscar-winning actors, fashion icons, and media moguls all receive invitations months in advance. Every name is deliberated over, some because of clout, some because of history with the organization, and some because of personal connections to the hosts. And the host, in this case, had made it very clear, certain personalities were to be welcomed, others not. Among the welcomed were the usual elite, directors with Academy Awards stacked on their shelves, philanthropists whose donations had made entire wings of the theater possible, and celebrities whose presence alone could raise the evening's prestige. Every name had a reason. Every arrival was calculated. The ABT Gala isn't about spontaneous entry. It's about controlled glamour, precision, power. Now imagine, then, the ripple of tension caused when whispers started circulating. Meghan Markle may be attending. Some thought it impossible. Some thought it inevitable. But no one expected her audacity to manifest in this way. Why? Because Meghan has always been a figure of fascination, polarizing even within royal circles. From the moment she stepped onto the global stage, she's balanced the fine line between admiration and skepticism. People watch her, critically, obsessively. Every outfit, every gesture, every smile dissected under the microscope of public opinion. But this was different. This wasn't the press scrutinizing a red carpet. This was the elite of arts and philanthropy, a world where subtlety, history, and precedent rule, watching someone who, intentionally or not, threatened to disrupt the delicate equilibrium of the evening. The staff backstage were in an uproar as the word spread. Did she really get an invite? Someone asked, eyes darting to the telephone, hands poised for intervention. Another whispered, I can't believe she's here. Even the maitre d', known for maintaining perfect composure under pressure, adjusted his tie, glanced toward the entrance, and muttered under his breath about protocol and precedent. And then there was the ambiguity. Was Meghan truly on the list, or had her team engineered a loophole? Were there back-channel confirmations, subtle gestures from those sympathetic to her celebrity, perhaps even royal connections quietly signaling that her presence would be tolerated? Or was this, as some staff suspected, a bold act of defiance, an attempt to be where she was not formally welcomed, testing boundaries, claiming space? Every detail mattered. Every step Meghan took, from the valet drop-off to her first glance into the grand ballroom, was scrutinized. Staff members stationed near the red carpet whispered updates into discreet earpieces. Security personnel exchanged subtle glances, sensing tension that could escalate. The gala, elegant and poised as it was, suddenly had a focal point of uncertainty, Meghan Markle. And let's talk about the rumors that circulated before she even arrived. Some insiders claimed Meghan had attempted to secure an official invitation weeks earlier, but had been politely, or firmly, denied. Others said a subtle compromise was struck, allowing her to appear, but without official acknowledgement from the host committee. There were even whispers about a celebrity ally quietly facilitating her entry, someone whose influence could override typical protocol. But these are unverified, a haze of gossip that only added to the tension, amplifying the drama that would unfold. Then came the moment when she actually arrived. Not through a side entrance, as some anticipated, but walking with a confidence that could rival any seasoned socialite. Cameras flashed, capturing every detail of her gown, the way she held herself, the slight, knowing smile that played across her lips. To the casual observer, it was a picture-perfect entrance, but to those in the know, every second was loaded with anticipation, suspicion, and a brewing question. Who had invited her? Think about that for a moment. Have you ever been to an event where your presence is questioned even before you step inside? The sensation of walking into a room where whispers accompany each footstep, where the eyes of the powerful silently judge your every move. It is a mix of fear, exhilaration, and raw audacity. That's the exact tension Meghan faced. Her entrance sparked an immediate internal debate among the staff. Some were stunned by her audacity, others by the potential fallout. If she's not invited, this could get messy, one whispered. Messy, another replied. This could be catastrophic. Think of the optics. And they were right. Because when it comes to galas like the ABT Fall Gala, optics aren't just important, they are everything. One misstep can turn an elegant evening into a media nightmare, broadcast globally across social feeds in real time. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on anyone. Meghan, whose every move has been scrutinized since she became a public figure, was stepping into a world governed by the unspoken rules of exclusivity, hierarchy, and discretion, rules she had arguably challenged throughout her career. And in that moment, with her presence officially unconfirmed, every eye in the room began to assess, categorize, and judge. But here's the twist. Even as the staff debated how to handle her, Meghan moved with a kind of strategic grace. She wasn't clumsy. She wasn't anxious. She appeared entirely comfortable in a setting where, technically, she shouldn't have been. Was this confidence or calculated risk? Was she aware of the undercurrent she had just unleashed? Perhaps. Or perhaps the moment had caught even her slightly off guard. Meanwhile, in the crowd, the regular attendees were starting to notice the ripple effect. Whispers passed from table to table. Eyes flicked subtly toward Meghan as she navigated the room, greeted acquaintances, and smiled politely. Some admired her poise, some bristled at her audacity, and others simply observed, sensing that a spectacle was about to unfold. And backstage, the tension reached a peak. Security briefings were hastily convened. Plans were discussed in hushed, urgent tones. If she refuses to comply with protocol, we may need to intervene, one security lead remarked. Another countered, we can't risk embarrassing the host in front of the media. Yet even as they debated, the question remained unsolved. Who had actually authorized her presence? It was, in many ways, the perfect storm. Meghan's presence, unconfirmed yet undeniable, created a scenario that could not be ignored. The room itself became a stage, with every participant a player in a drama that had been silently building long before the gala even opened its doors. The energy in the ballroom was electric, every glimmer of light bouncing off chandeliers, every hushed word carrying the weight of potential scandal. And as the opening moments of the evening unfolded, a quiet, tense anticipation settled over the crowd. Who would act first? Would it be staff, reacting to protocol violations? Would it be celebrities, subtly expressing disapproval? Or would it be Oprah Winfrey, whose authority in the room was absolute, watching from her position of power, ready to intervene if she sensed disruption? The question remained, who invited Meghan Markle? Because as the gala progressed, it became increasingly clear that her presence wasn't just a minor breach of etiquette. It was a challenge to the carefully maintained social hierarchy of one of the most prestigious cultural events of the year. And when that hierarchy is threatened, when rules are bent or bypassed, the consequences are immediate, dramatic, and often unforgettable. And that's exactly what would happen next. Because the arrival of Meghan Markle was only the opening act. The real drama, the confrontation that would leave everyone talking for weeks, was just beginning. And at the heart of it all, standing quietly but undeniably powerful, was Oprah Winfrey, watching, calculating, and preparing to make a decision that would change the course of the evening forever. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. When Oprah Winfrey enters a room, it's not merely an entrance, it's a seismic event. The atmosphere shifts. Conversations pause mid-sentence. Laughter falters. Eyes unconsciously follow her, not because she demands attention, but because her presence radiates an almost magnetic authority. And on the night of the 2025 American Ballet Theatre Fall Gala, Oprah was more than a guest. She was the unspoken queen of the room. From the moment she arrived, her aura set the tone. Every detail was deliberate. The tailored gown that shimmered subtly under the chandelier lights, the understated yet perfectly polished accessories, the way she moved with confidence yet grace, commanding respect without uttering a single word. For those in attendance, it was impossible to ignore her. And for Meghan Markle, who had just made her audacious entry, it was impossible to underestimate her. Oprah's influence stretches beyond Hollywood. Her opinions shape careers, her presence validates social events, and her judgment is often considered final. For decades, she has navigated the intricate dance of celebrity culture with unmatched precision, understanding who belongs, who threatens, and who can tip the delicate balance of power. And on this particular night, she had her eyes on one person, Meghan. Consider the dynamic for a moment. The gala had been designed with a meticulous hierarchy. Tables, seating arrangements, and entrance protocols were crafted not just for elegance, but for control. Celebrities are not just attendees. They are actors in a complex social choreography where every handshake, every glance, and every whispered comment has meaning. And Meghan, by virtue of her notoriety and unpredictable presence, was a potential disruptor. Oprah, ever observant, did not miss a single beat. She watched Meghan approach the grand ballroom, noting her posture, her interaction with the staff, and the way other attendees responded. Some were polite, some wary, and some openly curious. But the constant factor was Oprah's gaze, a subtle, silent evaluation. The kind of gaze that communicates, I see everything. I understand the stakes. And I will act if necessary. The queen of the room, in this context, isn't just about social dominance. It's about enforcement. Oprah's presence functions like a living protocol. Her gestures, subtle nods, and even facial expressions communicate boundaries. They signal who belongs and who risks crossing the line. And on that night, the line was about to be tested. To understand the gravity of Oprah's position, one must appreciate the weight of her reputation. She is a master of perception. In the entertainment industry, perception is reality. Every subtle reaction she makes carries significance. For a newcomer like Meghan, entering this meticulously managed environment was akin to stepping into a lion's den, except the lion is calm, calculating, and capable of instant, decisive action. As Meghan navigated the room, Oprah's team monitored her movements discreetly. Security personnel, trained in the art of subtle intervention, were positioned strategically. Staff members whispered updates into earpieces, noting every minor deviation from expected behavior. Every glance, every gesture, and every interaction was being cataloged. And all the while, Oprah observed, her presence a silent assertion of authority. Some in the room noticed the tension. A few of Hollywood's most seasoned stars, aware of Oprah's unspoken influence, paused in their conversations, sensing that something significant was unfolding. "She's watching," one whispered to another. "Everything she sees is a message." It's a phrase often repeated in private circles. When Oprah watches, decisions are made, not always publicly, but decisively and with lasting impact. But let's not mistake Oprah's authority for arrogance. She commands rooms not through intimidation, but through presence, insight, and the ability to control perception. She understands power dynamics at an instinctual level, and the dynamic unfolding between her and Meghan was, in essence, a silent chess game. Every move, every posture, every expression carried weight. And the stakes? Reputation, influence, and control of the narrative. Here's a surprising fact. Oprah rarely intervenes directly in events unless absolutely necessary. She is strategic, often preferring to let situations evolve to understand the player's intentions. But when she deems intervention essential, it is swift, precise, and impossible to ignore. And by the time Meghan had walked 10 feet into the ballroom, something about her presence had triggered that level of attention. Consider the whispers backstage. Staff speculated. Was Meghan unaware of the subtle power structures at play? Was she intentionally testing boundaries, asserting herself in a room where hierarchy mattered more than fame? Or was this simply the predictable result of mixing celebrity audacity with a controlled, elite environment? The answer, as we would soon discover, contained elements of all three possibilities. As the evening progressed, Oprah's influence manifested in small, almost imperceptible ways. A casual glance toward the exit sign, a subtle adjustment of a guest's position at the table, a carefully timed nod to security. Each action communicated an unspoken rule. Order must be maintained, and boundaries respected. For Meghan, every step she took was now measured against this invisible yet undeniable framework. And yet, Meghan carried herself with confidence, even defiance. It's the hallmark of someone used to commanding attention, someone accustomed to navigating the treacherous waters of public scrutiny. She smiled, acknowledged acquaintances, and positioned herself in a way that suggested she was aware of both the admiration and the apprehension her presence generated. But awareness is one thing. Compliance with the room's unspoken authority is another. Oprah's team, ever vigilant, began to prepare for potential escalation. Not because they expected confrontation, but because the presence of a figure like Meghan in a meticulously curated space always carries risk. Protocols were reviewed quietly, steps to escort a guest discreetly, communication strategies to minimize disruption, and contingency plans to protect the host and the gala's prestige. This was a calculated, preventative strategy, not a reactionary one. What makes this moment so fascinating, and what will become increasingly clear as the story unfolds, is the collision of two forms of influence: Meghan's celebrity audacity and Oprah's structural authority. One is based on public fascination and personal narrative, the other on control, observation, and the ability to shape events without uttering a word. And when these two forces collide, tension is inevitable. In the crowd, other attendees were beginning to sense the dynamic. Whispers spread, discreet glances were exchanged, and the subtle nervous energy that marks high-stakes social interactions became palpable. Some were impressed by Meghan's poise, some unsettled by her audacity, and some, particularly those with long-standing ties to the gala, braced for the possibility of public drama. Here's a question for you. Have you ever been in a room where someone's presence challenges the entire social hierarchy? The effect is immediate. Attention narrows, curiosity spikes, and a sense of anticipation grips every participant. That's exactly what happened that night. And while Meghan may have believed she was merely attending a gala, in reality, she had entered a theater of power, observation, and potential confrontation. And Oprah? She remained composed, poised, unflinching. Every action was deliberate, every glance measured. She understood that sometimes the mere act of watching, assessing, and signaling authority is more powerful than any overt confrontation. And yet, even her calm exterior belied the fact that a decision was brewing, a decision that would soon manifest in a way no one in that ballroom could ignore. Because in every meticulously curated event, there comes a moment when discretion gives way to necessity, when observation must transform into action. And as Meghan continued to navigate the room, unaware of the full weight of the gaze upon her, that moment approached. It would not be subtle. It would not be ignorable. And it would define the evening in a way that no invite, no gown, and no prior reputation could mitigate. But what happened next would change everything, and the consequences would ripple far beyond the gilded walls of the ABT Fall Gala. The moment Meghan Markle stepped onto the red carpet at the 2025 American Ballet Theatre Fall Gala, time seemed to slow. Every camera in the room pivoted to capture her. Every whisper among the elite attendees hushed into silence. Even the orchestra, tuning softly in the background, seemed to pause, as if acknowledging her presence. But this wasn't just an entrance, it was a gauntlet. A test of poise, audacity, and social intelligence, played out under the unforgiving scrutiny of Hollywood's finest, media moguls, and cultural icons. She was radiant. The gown she wore was a perfect blend of sophistication and subtle drama. Its silhouette hugged her figure flawlessly, flowing into an elegant train that caught the chandelier light with every step. The color, a deep, commanding shade that seemed to defy both fashion norms and expectations, made her presence undeniable without screaming for attention. Her hair and makeup were impeccable, each strand and contour seemingly placed to perfection. Onlookers would later describe it as both calculated and effortless, a paradox that only Meghan could manage. But the glamour was only half the story. This entrance was a calculated dance through social minefields. Every step, every nod, every smile carried weight. For someone like Meghan, who is constantly navigating the treacherous intersection of royalty and celebrity, even a slight misstep could ignite criticism, gossip, or public backlash. And in this room, every detail mattered, much more than most people outside would ever comprehend. Whispers began immediately. "Is she supposed to be here?" asked one well-known director, leaning subtly toward a friend as they watched Meghan's progress. "I thought the guest list was finalized weeks ago," replied the friend, eyes flicking toward the entrance. These murmurs traveled swiftly, moving like a current beneath the polished surface of the gala. Some were curious, some skeptical, and others wary, sensing the potential for drama that had already begun to unfold. Meghan, aware of the energy her presence generated, moved with a controlled confidence. Her smiles were measured, acknowledging friends without inviting scrutiny. Her gaze swept across the room, taking in the crowd, the layout, and, most importantly, the people who mattered in that moment. She was navigating a complex social ecosystem, one where alliances, perceptions, and unspoken rules dictated everything. And then there was the media frenzy. Paparazzi had been stationed along the red carpet long before the gala's official start. Their cameras clicked with relentless precision, capturing every angle, every movement, every subtle expression. By the time Meghan reached the grand staircase, live feeds were streaming online, and hashtags related to her arrival began trending within minutes. Meghan at ABT Gala became a digital echo of anticipation, speculation, and immediate public scrutiny. It's worth noting that for Meghan, such media attention is familiar territory. She has spent years under a global microscope, every move analyzed, dissected, and debated. But this was different. This was not the predictable environment of a public appearance where fans cheer and media commentary is expected. This was a private, curated space, populated by individuals whose influence extended far beyond social media metrics. These were people who could shape careers, control narratives, and define reputations with a single sentence. And she had just walked into the center of that influence storm. The reactions were instantaneous. Some attendees greeted her with polite smiles, others with subtle nods of acknowledgement, and a few with visible discomfort. One prominent Hollywood actor, seated at a table near the front, leaned into a colleague, whispering, "I didn't think she'd actually show up." The colleague smirked, replying, "I guess we're about to find out what she's made of." Indeed, the room collectively held its breath, sensing that Meghan's entrance was more than ceremonial. It was a challenge. From a psychological perspective, this moment was a perfect storm. Meghan's presence created tension, curiosity, and subtle competition all at once. She was both an intruder and a celebrated figure, a paradox that made everyone in the room reassess their perceptions. Observers unconsciously measured her posture, her confidence, her interaction with the staff and other guests. Every tiny gesture became a signal in the unspoken communication of power, influence, and social hierarchy. And then there was the question of intent. Was Meghan entering the gala purely for enjoyment, or was this an audacious display of social power? Some insiders claimed she had meticulously planned every element of her entrance, consulting with stylists, PR teams, and even insiders familiar with the gala's protocols. Others suggested it was a gamble, an attempt to assert her presence in a space where inclusion had never been guaranteed. The truth likely lay somewhere in between, a calculated risk with an eye toward spectacle, impact, and attention. The tension in the room escalated further as Meghan approached her first circle of acquaintances. Every handshake, every nod, every slight smile was observed, interpreted, and judged. Staff members behind the scenes communicated in whispers and subtle gestures, noting interactions that could either smooth the evening or set off a cascade of complications. Security, ever vigilant, remained alert, not because they expected physical confrontation, but because social escalations in environments like this often unfold in unpredictable ways. Humor and irony, of course, were not absent from the scene. Observers later recounted the amusing absurdity of watching Meghan maneuver through the crowd with calculated elegance, while staff and attendees simultaneously admired and silently critiqued her every move. One gala coordinator joked to a colleague, "It's like watching a chess game where the queen thinks she's a bishop." The analogy, though humorous, captured the essence of the situation. Meghan was playing a role, navigating a delicate game of strategy and perception, in a room filled with players who had perfected their own moves over decades. And yet, Meghan's confidence masked the tension perfectly. She was aware of the eyes upon her, yet she remained composed. She smiled when appropriate, acknowledged familiar faces, and maintained an aura of calm that suggested mastery over the situation, even if, beneath the surface, a mixture of nerves and anticipation existed. By the time she reached the center of the ballroom, her arrival had become a spectacle. Cameras flashed, whispers grew louder, and the room's energy shifted. Guests leaned toward one another, exchanging subtle comments, while some stared openly, analyzing the implications of her presence. Social media updates continued to pour in, reinforcing the sense that something extraordinary was unfolding. And then came the first subtle signal that this was more than just a glamorous entrance. A few attendees noticed an unusual intensity in Oprah Winfrey's gaze. She was standing slightly apart, surveying the room, and her attention had locked onto Meghan. The casual observer might have missed the nuance, a raised eyebrow, a slight tilt of the head, but anyone familiar with Oprah's influence understood the significance. The queen of the room was assessing, measuring, and, crucially, considering action. The contrast between Meghan's poise and the simmering tension around her created a magnetic dynamic. It was as if two forces, celebrity audacity and controlled authority, were converging. Every movement Meghan made was now being interpreted through a lens of scrutiny. Every step she took was not just an entrance, but a statement, a declaration that she would be present, seen, and acknowledged, regardless of existing hierarchies. And yet, the most critical question remained unspoken in the minds of nearly everyone present: who had truly invited her? Because, in the world of elite galas, The difference between inclusion and intrusion is razor thin. An invitation, or lack thereof, can define perception, dictate behavior, and shape the narrative long after the evening concludes. Meghan's presence, officially verified or not, had thrown the gala's social order into question. It was at that exact moment that a subtle ripple began to form. Staff members behind the scenes exchanged glances. Security adjusted positions. Guests whispered among themselves. And Oprah, with her characteristic calm and calculated authority, began to make decisions that would soon alter the course of the evening. Every subtle action, from a glance toward a nearby exit to a discreet phone call, signaled that the gala was about to pivot from a celebration of culture and art to a stage for confrontation. Because while Meghan's entrance had been a triumph of glamour, confidence, and spectacle, it had also set the stage for an unexpected showdown. The room's equilibrium had been disrupted, social hierarchies tested, and authority challenged. And at the center of this tension, the question persisted. Would Meghan be allowed to remain unchallenged, or would the queen of the room assert her dominance in a way that no one would forget? But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Some moments in life begin quietly, almost imperceptibly, only to explode into chaos within seconds. And at the 2025 American Ballet Theatre Fall Gala, it was a whisper, a single, hushed comment backstage, that set the entire evening on a trajectory no one could have predicted. The gala, as meticulously planned as it was, thrived on control. Every seating arrangement, every entrance, every movement of staff and celebrity alike had been choreographed to perfection. Yet, when Meghan Markle arrived, something shifted. The air seemed to thrum with a barely contained tension, and staff members whispered to each other in corners, eyes darting toward her. The whispered conversations were subtle, almost innocuous on the surface, but they carried tremendous weight. It began with a casual remark from one of the gala coordinators, a veteran who had overseen decades of high-profile events. Did she really get an invite? The coordinator murmured, barely audible over the soft hum of conversations and the delicate clink of glasses. The words seemed harmless at first, but in an environment where perception is everything, the whisper was electric. It traveled faster than anyone could track, ricocheting between staff, security, and select attendees. Another voice chimed in from behind the curtains. If she's not invited officially, we might have a serious problem. This was no longer idle speculation. It was the recognition of potential disruption. The presence of Meghan, a figure both admired and polarizing, was not merely a question of etiquette. It was a challenge to the unspoken power structure of the gala. What made this whisper so potent was timing. The moment occurred just as Meghan had moved into the main ballroom, poised in her carefully chosen gown, smiling politely, and acknowledging acquaintances. Cameras clicked relentlessly, capturing every gesture, every tilt of her head, every fleeting expression. The attendees, sensing a subtle disturbance in the social order, instinctively followed suit. Whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. Is she supposed to be here? Who authorized her presence? I thought the guest list was final. Each question, though quietly spoken, carried an undercurrent of shock, suspicion, and anticipation. The effect of the whisper extended beyond the staff. Security personnel, trained to respond to disruptions both physical and social, immediately noted the elevated tension. Their eyes subtly scanned Meghan, noting her position, her interactions, and the reactions of those around her. They remained composed, yet alert, acutely aware that even minor breaches of protocol in a room this tightly controlled could escalate rapidly. Meanwhile, the whisper had begun to reach influential guests. High-profile celebrities seated near the center of the ballroom leaned toward each other, their curiosity piqued. Did she get an invite? One asked, tone low yet urgent. The other responded, apparently, it's complicated. But if she's not on the list officially, this could get messy. Their whispered conversation, though private, carried with it a ripple of tension that quickly spread through the room. In the center of this unfolding storm stood Oprah Winfrey. Observant as ever, she had already noted Meghan's presence and demeanor. But the whisper backstage now added a critical dimension, an element of protocol violation. It wasn't merely that Meghan had arrived. It was that her arrival might have been unauthorized. In a room governed by hierarchy, prestige, and unspoken social rules, This was an infraction that could not go unnoticed. Oprah's gaze, steady and deliberate, scanned the ballroom. She understood the delicate balance of influence and power at play. Every whisper, every sideways glance, every discreet murmur of speculation was now a signal, an indicator that a decision would soon be required. And Oprah, with decades of experience navigating both Hollywood and high-profile cultural events, knew precisely when and how to intervene. The psychological effect on Meghan was subtle but tangible. Whether she was aware of the whispers or not, the energy in the room shifted. Attendees who had been previously engaged in polite conversation now leaned in slightly, their attention divided. Security subtly adjusted positions. Staff members communicated via earpieces, monitoring interactions and reporting observations. The tension was growing, an invisible pressure that surrounded Meghan and everyone else in the room. And then the inevitable moment came. Security, acting under explicit direction, subtly approached Meghan. Their presence was initially understated, just enough to create awareness without causing immediate alarm. A polite tap on the shoulder, a discreet nod, a whispered instruction. To the casual observer, it might have seemed ceremonial, almost routine. But to those who understood the stakes, it was the beginning of a confrontation that would dominate conversations for days. What makes this moment particularly captivating is the psychological complexity. Meghan had spent years navigating environments where influence, perception, and control intersect. She had faced scrutiny from paparazzi, tabloids, and the public. Yet here, she encountered a new type of power, a structured, almost invisible authority that governed behavior not through public opinion, but through deliberate, controlled action. It was a challenge unlike any she had faced before, and it required a level of composure that few could maintain. The tension in the room escalated further as Meghan responded to the initial intervention. Observers noted subtle changes in her posture, the brief furrowing of her brow, the slight adjustment of her shoulders. She was aware, to some extent, of the silent choreography unfolding around her. Yet her response was measured. She smiled, nodded, and continued to navigate the space, demonstrating both awareness and composure. But the stakes had shifted. What had begun as a glamorous entrance was now a delicate negotiation of authority, perception, and influence. Meanwhile, the whispering crowd, attendees who had sensed the shift from the beginning, now had confirmation that something significant was happening. Social dynamics in elite circles operate on a mix of perception and information. A subtle intervention by security, directed by the queen of the room herself, communicated volumes about status, legitimacy, and social order. Guests instinctively recalibrated their attention, some in awe, some in apprehension, and others in speculation about the implications. And as the interaction continued, Oprah's influence remained palpable. Her subtle gestures, an approving nod here, a watchful glance there, signaled that she was still in control of the room's narrative. Security's actions, while operational, were extensions of her authority. Every step Meghan took, every glance she made, was now filtered through this lens of control and observation. Consider the ripple effects. In an environment like the ABT Fall Gala, a single action can cascade into a series of social consequences. Media coverage would interpret every nuance. Attendees would recount the story in vivid detail, each retelling colored by perception and memory. Social media would amplify the spectacle, translating a moment of controlled intervention into global conversation. The balance of power, carefully curated for months, had been tested, and the world would soon bear witness. Yet, despite the tension, Meghan maintained her composure. She continued to engage politely with acquaintances, smiled at photographers, and moved through the ballroom with measured grace. To the casual eye, she appeared unflustered. But the room itself was a crucible, testing her ability to navigate authority, influence, and social scrutiny simultaneously. Every heartbeat, every subtle glance, every micro-expression now mattered more than ever. The climax of this moment approached as security, under Oprah's direct guidance, moved to subtly guide Meghan toward a more controlled space. The intervention was deliberate, strategic, and precise, designed to assert authority without igniting immediate public spectacle. And yet, the tension could be felt by everyone in the room. Guests instinctively leaned in, their curiosity heightened, their anticipation building for the inevitable next move. In retrospect, this was the turning point of the evening. What had begun as whispers backstage, amplified by perception and curiosity, had escalated into an orchestrated response by some of the most powerful figures present. Security's movement, subtle yet unignorable, transformed the gala from an elegant social gathering into a stage for confrontation. The implications were clear. Authority had been asserted, boundaries had been challenged, and the equilibrium of the evening had been irrevocably altered. And as Meghan navigated this controlled intervention, the world beyond the ballroom was waiting. Social media posts, celebrity gossip, and news outlets would soon catch wind of the story, transforming a meticulously managed gala into a spectacle of intrigue, speculation, and debate. Every step she took, every glance she exchanged, would be analyzed, dissected, and broadcast, further amplifying the stakes. Because in elite spaces like this, the line between decorum and confrontation is razor thin. A single decision, subtle, deliberate, almost imperceptible, can define the narrative for years to come. And that night, the intervention by security, guided by Oprah Winfrey, was exactly that kind of decision. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The ballroom had shifted in energy, though to an outside observer, the glittering chandeliers and the soft hum of conversation suggested that everything remained normal. But nothing could have been further from the truth. In the center of this elegant storm stood Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, confronted by a subtle but undeniable assertion of authority. Security had moved under the guidance of Oprah Winfrey, and every eye in the room was now partially, silently, yet unmistakably, on her. Meghan's initial reaction was a study in controlled elegance. Her posture remained upright, her shoulders squared, and her gaze steady, scanning the room with the calm of someone accustomed to attention. But beneath the surface, the subtle flickers of emotion were already apparent. The micro-expressions, the slight tension in her jaw, the minute adjustment of her fingers clutching her clutch bag. These tiny details, imperceptible to the casual observer, told a story of internal calculation, as if she were assessing her options in real time. Was this shock or strategy? That is the question that would dominate discussions in the hours and days that followed. Meghan, the subject of global fascination for nearly a decade, had become a master of public perception. Every movement she made, every smile she offered, had been honed to perfection. She understood the stakes. In a room where whispers could ripple into international headlines, composure was currency. Yet even masters of perception have moments where instinct collides with control, and those moments are electrifying to witness. The first few seconds of Meghan's encounter with the subtly enforced authority felt almost suspended in time. Security personnel, positioned with silent precision, guided the flow of movement without uttering a word. Guests leaned slightly forward, almost instinctively, trying to catch a hint of what might unfold. And in the center of it all, Meghan had to decide: comply, resist, or transform the confrontation into a narrative of her own making. Her smile, calm yet deliberate, was her opening move. It was a smile that acknowledged the situation without conceding power, polite but commanding attention. To the untrained eye, it was simply elegance. To those who understood social dynamics at this level, it was a calculated message. I see you, I understand the stakes, and I will navigate this my way. For some in the room, the smile was enough to ignite curiosity. Whispers began anew. Is she playing it cool? Does she know how high the stakes are? Or is this her way of taking control? These murmurs, carried between tables, reflected the duality of Meghan's persona. Admired for poise, questioned for audacity, and scrutinized for motives. And yet, even as she projected control, subtle emotional spikes were detectable. A fleeting raise of an eyebrow here, a slight tilt of the head there, each a microscopic sign of awareness, calculation, or perhaps an internal negotiation. Experts later analyzed footage from the gala and noted that these micro-expressions are hallmarks of high-stakes social strategy. They communicate intent, signal awareness, and sometimes serve to test the reactions of others, all without a single word being spoken. Audience, consider this. Have you ever been in a moment where you realize that everyone is watching and every move could define your narrative? Meghan was experiencing that exact tension in a room filled with individuals who had decades of experience in navigating influence, hierarchy, and perception. Every gesture could be interpreted, analyzed, and transformed into a story. Every slight hesitation could be weaponized. And Meghan, aware or not, was performing at a level that few could truly understand. As she navigated toward the perimeter of the subtly enforced boundary created by security, Meghan's reactions shifted subtly but significantly. There was a momentary pause, just long enough to register awareness of the forces at play. Then, with measured grace, she adjusted her approach, her path, her posture, and her engagement with surrounding guests, effectively transforming potential vulnerability into visual confidence. The psychology here is fascinating. By controlling the perception of composure, one can influence the perception of power. And Meghan, knowingly or instinctively, was employing that technique in real time. Meanwhile, the crowd's reaction was equally telling. Guests who had previously whispered speculated about her arrival now leaned in with heightened attention. Cameras focused relentlessly, capturing every micro-expression, every subtle adjustment in body language. Social media feeds lit up almost instantly as photographers and journalists transmitted glimpses of the unfolding tension in real time. The narrative had begun to extend beyond the ballroom, infiltrating online discourse, commentary threads, and eventually, global media coverage. What made this moment particularly compelling was the intersection of public perception and private strategy. Meghan's outward appearance suggested calm, control, and strategic navigation. Her internal state, though unknowable in totality, was likely a combination of calculated decision-making, instinctual responses, and the heightened adrenaline that comes with high-stakes social encounters. It is precisely this duality, poise versus instinct, that makes her reaction so captivating to both experts and the public alike. Consider the timing. Security had moved subtly, but their intervention was deliberate. They were not rushing her out. They were guiding her within controlled parameters. Their movements created a tension that Meghan had to negotiate with subtlety. A wrong step could escalate the situation, transform a private intervention into public spectacle, or provide fodder for the media. Yet, every response she made reinforced a careful equilibrium, balancing authority and grace. The first real test came when a senior staff member, acting on instructions from Oprah, subtly indicated a directional change, an unspoken redirection toward a designated area. Meghan hesitated just long enough for it to register with the observing crowd. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, almost imperceptible, and then she adjusted, seamlessly incorporating the guidance into her movements. To some, it was the perfect demonstration of composure. To others, a subtle acknowledgement of authority. And to the observers and media, it became a moment of intense speculation. Was Meghan compliant, defiant, or manipulating the situation in her favor? Even more fascinating was how she engaged with attendees during this delicate negotiation. She smiled politely, acknowledged acquaintances, and maintained conversation without breaking the visual composure necessary to project control. In effect, Meghan transformed a potentially humiliating or tense encounter into a controlled display of charisma and poise. The audience, both in the room and beyond, could not decide whether to admire her, critique her, or simply be mesmerized by the unfolding drama. But the most revealing moment came when Oprah herself subtly adjusted her posture and focused her attention squarely on Meghan. This is where the psychological chessboard becomes apparent. The queen of the room had observed, evaluated, and now signaled, through subtle body language, eye contact, and position, that the next movement would have consequences. Meghan's response to this signal would define the tone of the evening. It's impossible to overstate the tension in those seconds. Meghan was navigating an environment where her every micro-movement was recorded, scrutinized, and interpreted. Security remained poised and attentive, ready to escalate intervention if necessary. Attendees whispered speculations, cameras clicked, and social media feeds buzzed with anticipation. In essence, Meghan was performing a high-stakes balancing act, one that required perfect coordination of poise, strategy, and instinct. And then came the micro-expression that sent ripples through the room. A brief tightening of her jaw, a subtle narrowing of her eyes, a fraction of a pause. Observers later analyzed this moment and debated whether it represented shock, strategic calculation, or a combination of both. What is undeniable, however, is that in that instant, Meghan had fully recognized the stakes of her presence. She was no longer merely attending a gala. She was engaging in a social negotiation of influence, authority, and perception, one in which the queen of the room, Oprah Winfrey, held ultimate leverage. As the evening continued, Meghan adjusted her strategy in real time. She navigated the room with poise, balanced engagement with discretion, and managed her interactions with staff, security, and attendees carefully. Every smile, nod, and step became part of a larger performance, a display of resilience, control, and social intelligence under pressure. And yet, despite this mastery, the tension was far from resolved. Because in a room governed by influence, hierarchy, and perception, the reactions of others are unpredictable. One misstep, one poorly timed gesture, or one overlooked signal could trigger a cascade of consequences. Meghan had managed to navigate the first wave of scrutiny, but the next chapter of the evening, the confrontation, the spectacle, and the public reckoning, was still to come. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. By the time Meghan Markle had moved past the first wave of subtle security intervention at the 2025 American Ballet Theatre Fall Gala, the real storm was just beginning. It wasn't the murmurs backstage, the whispered speculation among staff, or even the silent scrutiny of Oprah Winfrey. No, the true spectacle of the evening, one that would ripple across social media, entertainment news, and public discourse, was about to erupt: the paparazzi frenzy. Imagine it for a moment. Hundreds of elite guests, high fashion and cultural prestige surrounding them, a room lit by crystal chandeliers reflecting perfectly off marble floors, and in the midst of it, Meghan. Cameras clicked relentlessly. Flashes painted the room in stark white light. Every movement, every glance, every subtle adjustment of her gown was captured, analyzed, and broadcast in real time. For Meghan, who had navigated public scrutiny for years, this was familiar territory, but never in a context quite like this. The first cameras focused on the grandeur of her entrance. Photographers leaned over velvet ropes, long lenses trained like precision instruments, capturing not just the visuals but the narrative, the story of audacity, composure, and conflict. Every photo was a frame in a larger drama, every angle an opportunity for interpretation. To the media, Meghan's presence was more than an arrival. It was a headline waiting to happen. As the images began circulating in real time, whispers from the crowd amplified. Guests who had been observing discreetly now leaned closer to see reactions, to gauge the unfolding tension. "Did you see that?" someone murmured, pointing subtly toward a cluster of photographers snapping furiously. "Every flash seems to be on her." Another replied, "Of course. She's the storm everyone's waiting for." The words, casual as they were, encapsulated the sensation in the room. Meghan had become both subject and spectacle. Social media, too, erupted. By the time Meghan reached the center of the ballroom, live feeds had begun transmitting images, commentary, and speculation to audiences worldwide. The hashtag #ABTGala 2025 began trending almost instantly. Tweets, posts, and stories speculated on her presence, debated her legitimacy, and dissected every detail of her appearance. Some praised her elegance, others questioned her audacity. Every observer became an analyst, every click, every share contributing to a growing narrative that the gala itself was now secondary to Meghan's entrance. It wasn't just the photographers' lenses that captured attention. Attendees themselves began documenting the scene. Smartphones subtly raised, live streams started discreetly under the tables, and whispered commentary recorded for later sharing. The gala, already a high-profile event, had transformed into a live spectacle of intrigue and public performance. And at the center of it, Meghan navigated a gauntlet of attention, cameras, and unspoken judgment with remarkable poise. But here's the twist. Even amidst this frenzy, the whispers backstage, the subtle tension from security, and the focused attention from Oprah remained active. Every flash of the camera, every live feed, every media capture added pressure to Meghan's navigation of the room. It wasn't merely a visual spectacle, it was a psychological test. How would she respond under scrutiny, under authority, and under the weight of global attention all at once. Observers noted subtle shifts in her movements. A slight pause as a camera flash erupted nearby. A discreet smile acknowledging an acquaintance without breaking composure. A gentle adjustment of her posture to maintain visual control of the narrative. Each gesture was deliberate. Each micro-movement was a calculated choice. To the trained eye, Meghan was performing at a level few could achieve, balancing elegance, authority, and narrative control while navigating an environment primed for chaos. Meanwhile, the media frenzy intensified. Photo agencies transmitted images instantly to editors across the globe. Online publications ran real-time updates. Meghan Markle spotted at ABT Gala. Was she invited? Security subtly guides Meghan through ballroom amid rumors. Headlines exploded, each iteration amplifying curiosity, speculation, and drama. The story was no longer just a gala, it was a viral spectacle. The interplay between public perception and private action became fascinating. Guests, aware of the unfolding media attention, instinctively adjusted behavior. Some approached Meghan to engage politely, ensuring their own image was captured favorably alongside hers. Others maintained distance, wary of the optics. Staff and security, constantly adjusting to the dual challenge of managing both the guests' movements and the growing media frenzy, moved like chess pieces across the ballroom. And the tension was not limited to the gala itself. Social media users, watching live streams and photos, began generating commentary at a pace impossible to track. Memes, hot takes, and debates about etiquette, celebrity, and authority exploded. Every movement Meghan made was dissected, analyzed, and interpreted across platforms.